All right,
Yes.
folks. Thank you, Nipuni, and thank you, the team at Designer, for letting me share this. Um, this is essentially the culmination of what's been, I say 3 years, but I think it's a little bit more. I think it's been about 4 or maybe 5 years, a journey that was 4 or 5 years that was completely unintentional. Uh, but like all good things, I guess, like a really happy accident. And I'm so glad I fell into this space. And looking at where things are heading right now in terms of technology and media, I think I'm glad I did this. And so what I want to do was I wanted to essentially share this with people, as many people as I can. The reason being that I am, and I say this to everyone, like everything that I do for a living right now, all the skills that I use to make a living right now, at least about 70% or 80% of it are skills that I learned on YouTube. Like my formal background and training, it's in something unrelated. And I do use those skills, but like if you ask me what pays my bills, it's stuff that I learned on YouTube. And I want to sort of essentially give back some of this, well, some of the knowledge that I've gained to other people. I put this off for a long time thinking I'm not qualified enough, but I thought the way that learning works today is that you share what you know and let people take what they can. Um, and I wrote this program or this course called 3D for Designers actually last June. I remember it was, I think my wife had a surgery. And then while she was recovering, we were in her parents' house, and I literally like took one weekend and I scripted like 30 tutorials, thinking I'll make like a video and put it on Udemy, but it never worked out and it was too complicated. What also happened is that while I was writing the course away at my in-laws' house, our house got broken into and we lost our TV. So I'm hoping that this course is worth my TV. But no, not really. Like, and I've sort of been putting it off, and I thought, I just need to like share this with as many people as I can. So what I want to do today is essentially this 3D for designers is a sort of, I call it a program, very with air brackets. um, it's essentially about 30 tutorials, quick tutorials that I plan to present in a webinar sort of setting like this at the end of the month, and maybe after that every month, to anyone who's interested. And today what I want to share with you is what this program is about and why it might be of interest to you. And then I'll talk about the specificities of this program little bit later. But I'm also open to like questions, and I wish I could have like shared the whole content here, but it's like about 6 hours worth of content, and I don't think I can like cram it all into half an hour. So I'm gonna try and cover as much as possible. So, there's Lorem Ipsum here. So for me, it all started with a toy. I'm just gonna get to that toy. So this was about like 6+ years ago. I used to like paint, right? So you can see one of the paintings at the back. Like I haven't painted, but I used to like paint like on canvases, murals, and it's in like an art gallery and all that sort of thing. And I was painting with canvas, and I stumbled across this thing called an art toy, right? So this is the original NFT. These were NFTs before NFTs were a thing, right? So these are collectible toys. They're essentially plastic, or they call them like, yeah, some variant of plastic. And basically these little bunny characters, you could buy a blank version of it, and different artists would draw or paint on them to their own style, and they would like add using like polymer clay. They would sculpt things out and they would really make it their own, and these are super hip, and it was done by this street art slash toy company called Kid Robot. Like if you want to talk cool, like these guys were like the peak of cool. And I so badly wanted to paint on these, but back in the day, and maybe today it still is a bit expensive to like bring stuff down from abroad. It's to like ship it using like DHL or whatever. and I couldn't afford it at that point. And we needed specialized markers and all of that. So this was in my mind, and by now, like, Ben is probably like rolling, and I remember showing one of these toys or something that looks like this to Ben, and at Green Cabin, and I asked him, hey, how do I make one of these in 3D? I literally wanted to like recreate one of these toys on 3D, and that was my goal. I was like, if I can't get the real thing, I at least make it on the computer and call it a day. And he told me like 3 or 2 magic words, try Blender, and that's it. Like my whole world changed from that point onwards. um so yeah, so later on I did eventually get to the 3D toy that I wanted to. And in fact, I made this toy, this is like a blank version of that. So I got to this guy quite early on in my 3D journey. It's not a very complex object, uh, but like over time I sort of refined it and made a bit better, optimized it better. But I got to this quite early. But what happened was that uh, I had the same sort of feeling or emotion that I had the first time I started learning Photoshop, which was when I was finishing school. It was, if you keep it track, that's about like 10, 12 or more, 13, 14 years ago. uh, that same sort of like explosion in my head, like, oh, there are all these creative possibilities. That same sort of starry-eyed wonder, and like, oh, you could do all these things. That I've never had that feeling for almost like 10 years. Like first time was when I figured Photoshop, like, or layer blending modes, or you could do this with multiply and all of that. And this was the second time when I was like discovering Blender and 3D and all that you could do with it. And I was learning all of this on YouTube, and the YouTube algorithm is designed to keep you going in circles. So and I took all of it in, right? I just consumed all the tutorial stuff that was not relevant to uh, make this, toy stuff that's relevant to like animators, VFX guys. Like it's a very, you could get lost in that space. And I took it all in, and I learned, and it's a continuous learning journey. And this, the reason I prompted me to make this course is because with 3D it's a bit of a long journey, because there were some concepts which I really struggled, and I used to like want to like throw my computer out because I just couldn't understand why something wasn't working the way it was supposed to, because I didn't have certain concepts that were like fundamental to the way I did things. But yeah, all these years later, this is what my desktop start menu looks like. So these are my most used. So the top three are like literally like it's like my right hand and my left hand. So Illustrator, Photoshop, Blender. Blender is the 3D program that I use. You can use another 3D program if you want to, but this is, I in fact use Illustrator and Blender more than like even Photoshop. But today, now like there's a trend in design, graphic design, where these textures and laying textures are like coming back, are cool again. So Photoshop is here, but these are the top three, and then these three I mess around with it, but not as much. So it's like, I can't stress enough how integral 3D is to my graphic design workflow, right? And I see so many of my graphic design colleagues, friends I've made through the agency and stuff like that. I'm just like wish I could tell them, hey, if you knew 3D, you could like make this way, like, make this jump like 100 levels. But the one thing that I kept hearing was, I tried, it's so hard to do I do the donut tutorial? And, I tried it, but so those of you who don't know, donut tutorial is a famous introduction to Blender tutorial on YouTube. So this is what it is. So, and that's what essentially prompted me to um, make this course. Now, I want to show you a few examples of 3D in my workflow, or how I've used 3D. Obviously you can make your own, like the possibilities are endless. And if you're an interior designer, or working in sort of any architectural, I mean, I guess that you already are using it. It's indispensable already, but some concepts would be helpful. So this is the first story. So when I started working so I used to work at an ad agency called Response, which is part of a larger group called Grants. Now it's called Dentsu. Um, and this was, I joined in like 2 months in, like we have this big pitch that's to rebrand Savoy Cinemas, which was EAP Group, which was acquired by another company. So we were supposed to pitch, and we are like, our team, we didn't have a ECD, or executive creative director. We had some, some we had a CD, but there was a management ego issue and all of that. So basically the ECD from the senior team, like another team, Russell, a sort of well-respected senior person, he sort of quickly sketched this out and he sent us this logo. It's like, that's all the time he had. It's like, guys, I don't have time, but I'll do this for you guys. And he sent us this sketch, and it was cool. It was approved, management approved it, all of that. And then we were trying to like make this pop, right? And I remember sitting down like 2 months in, my MD, who's like an ad industry veteran, like she's standing behind me and she's like giving me instructions. Okay, Niruban, change the colors here, gradient here, trying to make this logo pop, right? And I said, I've never worked on Illustrator faster in my life. Like I was like, it's like so fast. And then all good. It got approved. And then, it was so, but I thought, that the concept was something else, or I knew what the concept was, and I felt like the 2D rendition of it logo didn't really do justice to the logo. So I sat there in the evening on a Mac, and I say Mac begrudgingly because 3D people know that Macs are not good for 3D design, right? So with whatever I could, I turned this logo into 3D, and then I'm going to show you what I did. But basically, when we like presented to the client, like we did the strategy, the boring bit, like just trying to justify our creative, and then we showed the client the logo and the 3D version. They were like, that reaction, like if you ever pitched and you've got that reaction, you know what I talk about. It's sort of like they sort of see it, okay, this is what our brand could be and is about, and they were excited. That's the best feeling you could get as a designer. So this was sort of where we the first slide we showed in the creative, like this is Savoy. And we did different renditions, and at that point I realized like certain things we were able to communicate, like the fact that these were supposed to be like these lights which were inset onto the letter. There was neon involved, and I was able to accurately render out a glass square and then put the neon on top of it, and it looked pretty, right? So that was the first. So I realized, okay, I'm onto something. Yeah, I'm onto something that could help us win pitches. But over time, I started using it in different things. So branding, if you're doing any branding work, like for packaging, like it's super, super important, because usually what would happen is you would try to find a mock-up from the internet, and you would try to either Photoshop it onto that, or you would try to Photoshop your artwork onto that. But for this, it was an early stage product. We were able to sort of, this was after I left the agency on my own, like create a custom glass bottle, and then this little red to white gradient, that glass tinting effect, it was done within 3D. So when the client asked us for a flat artwork, I said the whole thing is done on 3D. I can give you the 3D file, but that's, yeah. So, and again, seeing this, like I'm telling you, like just showing the bottle and the different angles of the bottle and see the packaging come to life, that like we were able to like really sell the design through. And yeah, so much I could talk. And again, like another example, this is not my best, but I did for a friend, and I really like the design. So yeah, another design example. The next one is also 3D has helped me tackle some of the most awkward requests that I've got. So basically, I work at Cisco Labs, and Cisco is a US company, and in the US they distribute food to various parties, right? So they have these big trucks that take food from their warehouses to restaurants and things like that. So my CEO said, I want to have a Microsoft Teams background where you take one of those trucks, but they're in Sri Lanka, right? And we had only like certain pictures of those trucks, and we tried like photoshopping them. It was like you could see as a designer when like even the slightest like off angle, and like the angles don't line up, like it's fake. So I fortunately, I found a model of a truck, bought it for like $15, I think, and then used a plugin which essentially, based on a photograph, it could um, tell you the focal length and angle at which the photograph was taken. There's some like sort of wizardry in there, not on my part, but on the computer's part, on the part of the people who made that program. But for me, it was just a few clicks. And then based on that, you could accurately like sort of place the truck as it were quote unquote really there. So I was personally quite happy with this project, because it was like one of those really awkward jobs that you get, but I was able to use it to like save myself from my own criticism. So, and place this object there clearly. And also like branding, I can't like tell the number of times that 3D has really helped us like push the branding project through to help the client visualize. So this was for a tech consultancy. And basically, long story short, the whole concept for their brand, we were like, your concept is glass, right? So we built it up as a glass is high density data storage solution. So in the future, all data will be stored on glass. We're like, glass is your thing. So all I had to do was render out a few pieces of colored glass, and then boom, the concept was so like that's so that the list goes on. Like in fact, I wish I had this picture, but I don't have it. The reason I have this, I got the job at Cisco right now, is because I did a t-shirt project for them like 3-4 years ago, and that's how I formed the relationship with them. And all I did was they wanted a t-shirt design, so I took a t-shirt on a 3D model, and I did the design on 3D so they could spin around and see how the t-shirt looks from all angles. And I guess it got me a job. So yeah, it's that's the ways in which I use this. And also you could just make cool things. So this is what the final toys that I made on 3D. Like I picked one that I like on it, like abstract shapes that looks like it's made of glass and plastic and light. These, I think, abstract shapes are like in vogue right now. Key visuals is another key visual I did for Cisco Labs. It wasn't used, so I think I'm allowed to share it. Yeah, and also like typography. So I was trying to do this series which I never finished, which is basically Tamil typography in 3D. I never finished this. I have like 2-3 letters done, but yeah, you could use it for like typography and posters and yeah, like toys and stuff like that. So like you could do a lot of things with it. Like as a designer, you could incorporate into your workflow in interesting ways. And that's what I want to do with this program. And tell you why. I want you to essentially take your phone or your laptop screen and bring it as close as you can to your eyes and try to count individual pixels on it. All right. And so if you're using an iPhone, maybe you can't count the pixels, but if you're using like any other phone, because iPhone, the pixel density is quite high, you could like count out the pixels on your screen, right? And this is important. I'm getting a bit nerdy here, but bear with me, or geeky. See, the screens on a phone, they're not very different to things like a traffic light, right? Which is, if you think about it, they're like a low resolution display, or like these old digital watches, right? They have like bigger size pixels, right? So the thing that you have to understand is whenever you do any kind of design on your computer, you're essentially manipulating pixels. And these pixels live in the real world. What I'm trying to say is, if you think about it, they are essentially super tiny LEDs or light sources that live in the real world. Like you can touch your pixels almost. And that's important to know, all right? So what we do, say, for example, in a software like even Microsoft Paint, if any of you have done it, as a kid, I used to like take the airbrush tool and just like scribble all over it on Microsoft Paint. What you're doing is essentially you're coloring those pixels. So you have, imagine like you have a HD monitor, you have 1920 by 1080 pixels, which can be lit up in various color profiles. And what you're doing as any kind of like graphic or any kind of work on the computer, whether it's Microsoft Paint, PowerPoint, Word, all of that, you're coloring pixels. That's what you're doing. It's the same as taking a like coloring book and coloring with crayons. And even Photoshop is essentially the same thing. You're coloring pixels. You are, except Photoshop is like Microsoft Paint on steroids, right? Like it's got way more features, but at the end of the day, you're trying to color those pixels. Same thing, like whether it's you're using Procreate or Illustrator, or you're trying to make something on your iPad, like you're coloring pixels. That's all that you're doing. That's what you do. Like when I say 2D design, any like kind of 2D design work, that's essentially what you're doing, right? You're coloring pixels, and the pixels, they live in the real world. Remember, real world, keyword here. Now I want you to tell me, right? Maybe you could unmute this blue color blob. Is that blob a 2D object or a 3D object? Anyone? You could just unmute, could just tell me 2D or 3D. I can't see the chat. So anyone? Okay, you could drop it in the chat. I guess I can see it.
I'm gonna go with 2D.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with 3D.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
The reason why I said 2D is because I don't see any shadows.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So you're all right in the sense that there's not enough information in this blue color blob for us to determine whether it's a 2D or 3D object. But here's the fascinating thing about the human brain, right? We can interpret things with very little information. So even though there's no information on this blue color blob, our brains can, based on the motion and things like that, our brains can interpret it as a 3D object. What I'm trying to say is that 3D, if you look at 3D, right, it's what you're doing with 3D design is that you're simulating a 3-dimensional universe inside your computer. So you could take your, if you're using a desktop or a laptop or whatever computer that you use, well, you're essentially simulating a 3D universe, a 3-dimensional universe, right? And you're essentially projecting that universe onto a 2D plane. And this is like the mindset hurdle that we need to overcome sometimes, because that's why it's so confusing. Like with VR, it's different because you're manipulating 3D objects in 3D space, right? On the laptop, you're essentially projecting. So if I take this blob, assume that this gray color box is the 3D universe that's inside our computer. Essentially, it's only a projection, or you're projecting part of that onto the pink color box, which is the 2D plane. So it's a projection of a 3D universe onto a 2D plane, and that's why it's complex. And I'll tell you how we overcome this, or how we do this in a few slides more. And just like the universe that we live in, right? So we live in a universe, right? I'm getting a bit nerdy here, but we live in a universe, and there are rules in this universe, right? Talk about like physics rules, like there are rules about gravity, there are rules about magnetic forces, there are rules about different things, right? And just like the universe we live in has rules, this universe within our computer also has rules, okay? And there are 3 rules that we need to be concerned with. Number 1 is that it has rules about how light works. In our universe, there are certain rules about how light works. And if you're a photographer, and I guess if you're a interior person, you would have a good idea about what some of these behaviors of light is. I think photographers have a really good understanding of how light works. In the fake universe or the simulated universe, there are rules for light, and they could be the same as us, or they could be different. There are rules about physics, right? So those rules can be the same as the universe that we live in, or those rules can be slightly different. Like in our universe, there's gravity is like a it's like a rule, like if you drop something, it will fall at a certain rate, right? You can't change that. But in the 3D universe, maybe you could make things fall slower, or maybe you could make them levitate, right? Or make them not fall or not move at all, so there's no gravity. So you could change the rules about physics in the 3D universe. And the last rule, it's not a rule, it's more like things that work. Probably the most similar thing is about math. Now, I'm not trying to like scare you guys and say you need to be a physicist or a mathematician to use 3D in your design. You don't have to, but it's just that these things are there, and that's probably why there's a learning curve, is because you need to understand a little bit about how light and physics work and math work, at least a very basic understanding to start making artwork. But it's a very small amount of knowledge that you need. It's not a lot. So this is how the process works, right? So firstly, we need to create a virtual universe. You need to create this universe within your computer. You still can't see it yet. You still can't click save as JPEG and create like a 3D design. The most important step is you need to place a virtual camera in that universe, right? You need to place a camera. And this is why if you open any 3D program, I guarantee like you could take the simplest of 3D programs to the most advanced 3D programs, you will see something called a camera. Because if there's no camera in the 3D universe, we can't see what it's creating, right? And you need to essentially take a photograph of that universe and send it back to our universe. So instead of coloring, and this is where the differences between 2D design and 3D design is. In 2D designs, you color your pixels and you call it a day. In 3D design, you're creating a universe and you're acting like a photographer. So just, I hope that difference makes sense. 2D is like an artist, you paint. In 3D, you're like a photographer, you're taking virtual pictures inside a virtual universe. So if you look at people who use 3D for film and VFX and games and things like that, what they try to do is match that universe as close as possible to our one. So that's why these guys, you hear the term photorealistic. So they're trying to make it as real as it is, as if we were to take that same photograph in the world that we live in, right? So if you take a photograph of a person, they want to match the virtual photograph to make it as close as it is to a photograph of a person in the real life. That's what their job is. People in film and VFX, they want to make it as realistic as possible. Even when they make imaginary things like laser beams and stuff like that, they want to make it as if those laser beams live in the real world. But 3D for designers, we're not really trying to make it photorealistic. We are only trying to express an idea, a thought. We are also more interested in abstract ideas, I guess. And we're trying to storytell. So there's a different set of objectives. And what I realized is that in the whole 3D community, no one has really approached 3D for design because it's such a small subset of the larger industry. Our requirements are different. It's not that there are certain commonalities, but our requirements are different. And if you look at what those requirements and what are the ingredients that go into this is basically a map of all the, let's just call it skills that are in the 3D world, like a very high level description of all the skills. So there's making 3D objects, lighting and rendering, VFX and animation. And if you want to be a 3D generalist in the film and VFX industry, you would probably know all of this. But we are not, our objective is not to make films and video games. If you want to, you can. But if you want to use it as a graphic designer or as a designer in that sense of the word, even any other kind of designer, you would be probably interested in these particular highlighted areas. And that's the reason I put this course together, because when you go and learn on YouTube, unless it's like this, 3D is like a vast map, right? So all these things are there. And if you try learning random tutorials, you will get good at that, but it'll take you a long time, which is what happened to me. I didn't know what specific things I needed to spend more time on. But if you could, if you know what those things are and what principles you need to learn, then you could sort of zone in on those and just get better at those things, so you could make it include it into your workflow as a designer. So that's what this program that I created is all about. It's creating this map and then walking people through each parts of this, each pit stop in this map, so that they could sort of be better in terms of using it within your existing design workflow. Yeah, it's concepts. It's not specific to a software. So that's what the program is. It's not about teaching a specific software, because there are so many softwares out there. Like you have Blender, you have Cinema 4D, you have Facebook has like a 3D software called Spark AR, and yeah, there's a new 3D software coming every week and every month. And the goal is not to learn software, but to learn these principles. And if you know these principles, trust me, you could pick up any 3D software and you'll figure it out very quickly. The complexity of 3D is that there's different UI. The UI is cluttered, like, you know, it's very complex. So that's that learning curve. But if you don't know 3D concepts, then you have to like, you know, it's twice as hard. So if you know the 3D concepts, you could pick up any software and just overcome the challenge of using that UI, and not have to deal with having to relearn the fundamental concepts. Like if you open up something and there's UV mapping, at least you know I need to look where the UV mapping toolbar is, as opposed to trying to figure out, well, why is this not working the way it's supposed to work. And the way I've done it is that I essentially made a community, and yeah, so the idea is that it's a community. It's basically instead of making it like a one-off webinar and like just letting everyone go, when you participate in the webinar, you get access to this space which I've created called circle.so. And my goal is to keep updating this place with other content, right? So it's dedicated. It's not like you'll have to search, like follow my YouTube or like, you know, follow my Instagram. Like I'm going to like upload, because I have so many ideas for stuff that I want to like teach people, and I'm going to like dump them all here, and keep on updating this over here. And yeah, you'll get access to all the content that I'm done here. I think I just set this up in the morning, so it's looking rather bleak. And yeah, so I am looking forward to having the first session on the 17th and 18th of February. So it's 2 days, 3 hours in the evening. And yeah, and I'll drop this link on the chat. And there is a discount code. If you use Benrocks, you get 50% off on the program. So yeah, it's $35. Like, so the price in Sri Lankan rupees is 7,000 rupees, but the platform lets you charge it in dollars. But you can use the term Benrocks to get 50% off, and this code is valid forever. So that's about it. And I'll be more than happy to like take questions. If you want me to show something live, I could open up Blender on my computer and show it to you now. Yeah,